Without further ado, I am going to introduce the next comic. You might know him from as the co-host of the Oddball History podcast. So please, everybody, give it up for the one and only Scott Crisp, everybody.
Hey, keep it going for our host, huh? Tyler, how you feeling? Y'all good? A little bit about me. I'm a Texas man. I'm from right here in Texas. I like being a Texan, you know. I think my favorite thing about being a Texan, I love being pandered to by pickup truck commercials. Y'all into that shit? I don't know if you can gather from looking at me, but I'm not a man who gets a lot of compliments on my work ethic. In my day-to-day life, nobody ever assumes I might have ranching to do. Got to go to the Texas truck commercials for that kind of positive talk, you know what I mean? Every Texas truck commercial's basically the same. There's like a ruggedly handsome cowboy in a pasture. He's been working hard out there, you know, you can tell. He throws a bale of hay into the bed of a gleaming new pickup truck, and then in slow motion he wipes his brow against a setting Texas sun. Voiceover says something like, as a Texan, working hard is in your DNA. I'm watching along at home just stoned off my ass, eating a zebra cake for breakfast at 1:30 in the afternoon. I'm like, holy shit, finally a little truth in advertising. Finally a truck company who isn't scared to tell it like it is about what a handsome cowboy I truly am. I love those commercials, man. They do wonders for my self-esteem. Frankly, I think it's a shame you only ever see the real Texas commercials for real Texas products, things that, frankly, Texans already really love, you know? Pickup trucks, various brands of chili, Dairy Queen, that's a big one. You know? That is what I like about Texas, now that we mention it. But, you know, it doesn't have to be real Texas shit like steak fingers and cream gravy. You could sell anything this way, I would argue. Like, imagine that same commercial, the truck commercial from before, the ruggedly handsome cowboy. He's back. He throws the bale of hay into the truck, you know, only this time, instead of wiping his brow against that setting sun, he itches his ass a little bit. Voiceover says something like, as a Texan, you need a Japanese bidet toilet that works as hard as you do. Introducing the Takahashi X3200 Mega Toilet Texas Edition. The Texas Edition, that's a bit of an upsell. Yeah, whether it's really worth it's kind of up in there. All that means, you know, they put a little lift on it. You gotta like go up a little step ladder to take a shit from now on. Not the most convenient thing in the world, but very Texas. Also, they put a little brown leather there on the tank, kind of give it an overall Western feel. And then the pièce de résistance. When you flush it, a robot voice sings Amarillo by Morning by Mr. George Strait, in a voice that's both beautiful and haunting in a sci-fi movie kind of way. I actually worry, like, this one brand of advertising I feel like works too well on me, you know? I'm so susceptible to it. I'm a sitting duck in that way, you know? Like, I feel like I could be talked into anything if you just use that Texas commercial voice, you know? Like, I like to think of myself as a man who will not in his life smoke PCP. It's like, what if they came out with a real good commercial for it, you know? Just for us Texans? Saying stuff like, "Did you ever want to feel like God for a spell? Introducing the PCP binge." Imagine that, you know, they open actor Sam Elliott right there on screen, you know, saying, "You ever get a Texas-sized hankering to take all your clothes off and fight an entire police department?" If so, there's just no substitute for Old El Paso brand PCP. I don't know why I have Old El Paso getting in the PCP game in the end of that joke. But, you know, I think they mostly do like chips and dips now. It'll be a hard left turn. I'll tell you folks, when you look like I do, sort of like all the members of Lynyrd Skynyrd combined, or like if Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters managed to half-price books, or like if Jesus had been really into disc golf. You have that look like I do, like people see the Eddie Vedder hair and they automatically assume, they know everything about my life. They're like, oh, I bet this guy smokes a lot of weed, sits around the house all day eating Cheetos, watching old episodes of the Andy Griffith Show, assuming all this shit about me. And that is convenient for me because I do. That was a really accurate snapshot of my life at the moment. Right on down to the Andy Griffith Show. I wasn't just saying that to sound cool in front of y'all. Today, it was the episode where they thought a goat might have ate a bunch of dynamite, but then later it turns out he didn't. Or something. I fell asleep at the end, if I'm being honest with y'all. Probably had to catch back up on that one, I'm guessing they didn't show a goat explode on the Andy Griffith Show in 1963, but now I'll never know for sure. I think my good relationship with weed, it started out as a kid, I was never scared off of it, was the thing. They tried to scare us off of it back in school, I remember. They had a thing called the DARE program. Any of y'all present for the DARE program? Bold approach on their part, looking back, They gathered all us kids there in the auditorium, and they dared us. They dared us to just say no to drugs, and me and every member of my generation, maybe a few of y'all remember this, we stepped outside and huddled in a large field for about 15 minutes. And we came back to them and we were like, no deal. We're talking it over in that field, and we decided we're gonna see what all the hubbub is about when it comes to these drugs, all the hoopla. This McGruff character's kinda cool, he can stay. Outside of that, best we can do is wearing your shirts ironically as adults. Yes. I remember that was where I first heard the term gateway drug, the idea being like, we'll grant you, pot isn't so bad, we'll grant you that, but it could lead to harder drugs. It's bad in that sense. I never really bought into that line of thinking myself, simply because I was always the youngest member of my family. I always had older brothers and cousins who were having real life experiences with drugs and alcohol, never so much matched up with what they were talking about in the old DARE assembly. Like I had this one cousin, his name was Catfish. That's right, Catfish. I remember old Catfish, he'd tell me stuff, he'd be like, Scott, don't you listen to these folks who tell you marijuana is some kind of gateway drug, all right? The only place marijuana ever led me was to my damn pantry. Because of the munchies. Then sad to say, a few years ago, that cousin, he passed away. We were cleaning out his house. We learned his pantry's where he kept all his heroin. So I guess score one back for the DARE program on that count. Generally, they got a lot of stuff wrong. In Catfish's case, they were almost hauntingly right. And you don't have to feel bad about laughing at that joke, which contains in it the death of my cousin. I'll tell you why. Couple things you should know about the cousin in that joke. First thing, his whole family has heard me perform that joke, his mom and everything, and they love it. They think it is hilarious and well crafted. Second thing about that cousin, I just made him up. He's not a real guy at all. Heard the name Catfish on an old episode of Hee Haw, and thought that's going in the act, You don't got to worry about it, He was invented out of whole cloth for reasons of comedy, this character of Catfish. So, his death is no tragedy. I will say, he is based on a real cousin of mine who did say that thing about gateway drugs. And we did find heroin in his apartment after his untimely death, but that's where the similarities end. I took over with my artistic license from there, for one thing, in real life, his name, that cousin, was not Catfish. And for another, his family is way not okay with me doing this joke. No, he's made up. He's made up, for real. My aunt's attorney said I have to say that from now on. No, he's made up. He's made up, for real. I used to never come clean that he was made up. People would just leave my shows feeling sad about the untimely demise of my cousin Catfish. It was very funny for me, when it would get back to me, but not so much for anyone else, in the show. That's not the gig, you know? The worst that ever happened was one time I was opening up. They had me, are y'all familiar with the town of Denton, Texas? Yeah. It's like it thinks it's Austin, kind of. It's like that's kind of the vibe, you know? Anyway, long story short, they got me to do my comedy stylings to open up a punk rock show in Denton, Texas. Somebody had that idea. They were like, hey, you know what I bet these punk rock kids would like to see before their punk rock music gets started? It was like 20 minutes of super low energy stand-up comedy. And I'm like, whoa, that sounds like a fucking nightmare. I'm in. That's like every show when you're early in comedy, you're just booking appointments to eat shit sandwiches. And man, did I. It was a red letter night in my shit-eating career. Yeah, it was just us doing stand-up comedy to like 3 punk rock bands and their girlfriends, basically. It's not the hottest mic I've ever been on. I don't mind telling you. And then the cherry on top of that whole night, you know, I'm leaving and I hear through the grapevine through a friend of mine, he's like, oh, one of these bands is really upset with you about that old heroin in the pantry gag. And I say, you know, like a so-called punk rock band in my mind, because in my mind, a real punk rock band would have never been offended by that joke, you know? They wouldn't have even heard it. If they were the real deal, they would have been out in the parking lot overdosing on heroin. I've seen behind the music. I know what goes on. I was watching that movie, Forrest Gump, the other day. You guys like that movie, Forrest Gump? I'm a big fan. I know I'm a big fan. I can tell because I watch it every time it's on TV, and it depresses the shit out of me every time it's on TV. I just go back for more, like a dog who doesn't know when to stop eating. You know what I mean? I fucking love it. I watch it every time. The most depressing part of the movie, I would argue, is the plight of Forrest's childhood sweetheart, Jenny. Very depressing life old Jenny had, you know. Jenny's life was so depressing, like even the funny parts of it are sad when you think about them for too long. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I always thought it was super funny how throughout the movie, Forrest and Jenny would reconnect, and wherever they were, whatever stages in their life, Forrest would immediately beat the shit out of Jenny's new boyfriend. No matter what was happening, you know, sometimes for good reason, like because he struck Jenny, and sometimes for bad reason, just because Forrest wasn't good at interpreting affection, differentiating it from like aggression, and so he would just come in throwing haymakers, you know. I always thought that was the funniest thing as a kid watching that movie. And then I think about it as an adult, it's like, Jesus, man, like within the context of the movie, like for the character Jenny, that is a decidedly unfunny state of affairs. This is a difficult conversation she's got to have at the beginning of every new relationship for the rest of her life. You know, got to sit that new man down and be like, look, I like you a lot, so I want there to be no secrets between us. Having said that, you should probably know at literally any point during our relationship. My mentally disabled ex-boyfriend, Forrest, who played football at the University of Alabama, full-ride scholarship, by the way, before going over to Vietnam, where he became sort of an unkillable super soldier. Well, he could just emerge from the shadows and beat the dog shit out of you. I say could, I mean definitely will. If we're together for so much as a month, you have a 100% chance of catching a red-ass beatdown from this character. You see his flat top, it's already too late. Every date, every outing will be that American Gladiators game, you know, where you run through the door not knowing if there's nothing on the other side or a gladiator waiting to beat that ass. You know, don't get me wrong, I will run over there and pull him off you when this inevitably does happen. You know, I always do. But if I'm being honest, I've never got there before. Forrest has landed 8 to 10 real clean shots. I tell you, if I were a UFC referee, I'd have been fired long ago. Oh, yeah, and since I last saw him, he can run for days at a time without tiring or slowing down, not unlike an ostrich or an Alaskan sled dog. But, you know, like one that could whoop your ass real bad while the expression on his face never changes. But if you're good with all of that, living under near constant threat of being accosted and pummeled by a learning disabled billionaire shrimp boat captain who the entire Viet Cong couldn't kill, I think we could be happy together for a very long time. You guys like impressions? How do you feel about impressions? All right, cool. I was going to do them anyway. I wrote them on the card in the back. I can't deviate from the card, you know? That was chaos. I only got a couple impressions, you know? This first one, this is a character I've been doing for some time called Stone Cold Steve Austin in Therapy. If you don't know Stone Cold Steve Austin, first pick up a damn history book. Why don't? No. If you don't know Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was a wildly famous wrestler when I was a kid, you know. He came along at a time when most wrestlers still had like a gimmick. They would have like a job and that was their character. You would be like a cop or an army man, you know, or a Viking, one of those Vikings we had in the 90s. You remember? Stone Cold Steve Austin came along and he changed all this. He had no wild character. His only character was man from Texas with rage issues. That was the whole thing. He wore skin-tight blue jean shorts that somehow made him more badass. One time, he broke the wrestler Flying Brian Pillman's leg in a folding chair on Monday Night Raw, and when they tried to take him to the hospital, Stone Cold blocked the ambulance in with his truck. He was just like a great wrestler in that way. You know what I mean? Knew all the holds. From your suplexes to your ankle locks to your denying your opponent needed medical care. The main thing about Stone Cold Steve Austin, though, is he was just always saying the coolest shit you've ever heard. Like, he was the best wrestler on the microphone of all time, you know? He would say stuff like, he'd be like, Austin 3:16 says I just whipped your ass. Which I don't think that's a real Bible verse. But holy shit, what a cool thing to say. As a wrestler, you know? And I mean, he was a hero of everyone. When I was a kid, like if you're my age and you're from Texas, he was definitely your hero. And I mean that literally like he became a hero because every Monday night he would beat the shit out of his boss, Vince McMahon, on TV. He would get drunk on beer and then at the end, inevitably, just kick the shit out of his boss, Vince McMahon, while like flipping him the bird and shit. He dared to live that dream every week on the USA Network. Really reverberated with everyone, you know, I feel. You know, most of us who can only dream of kicking the shit out of our boss, even one time, you know. He was such a hero. One time me and my brothers went to see wrestling live at Reunion Arena in Dallas, and when Stone Cold Steve Austin came out, we watched as a young father at the end of our row taught his toddler-age son how to flip the bird, just like Stone Cold. He was like holding his hand. He's like, no, like this. You know? It was almost beautiful, you know what I mean? That father-son moment. Like I could almost hear that song, Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, Little Boy Blue. And at the same time, though, you know that kid's mother was pissed when he got dropped back off that night. I'm assuming this man was divorced. She's like, my God, why would you teach him this? And he's like, why would you take McMahon's side? Yeah, that line never gets much, but I love it so much. It just stays in, you know, to my own detriment. Anyway, this is that character, Stone Cold Steve Austin, in Therapy, all right? Stone Cold Steve Austin in Therapy. Middle school was a tough time for Stone Cold. Thank you. That is Stone Cold Steve Austin in Therapy. Stone Cold Steve Austin wishes he'd got to know his granddad a little better before he passed. Well, yeah, Stone Cold Steve Austin loved his first wife. He just didn't know how to show it. You know, and so on. Second impression. This, I don't know why I announced it like that. You know what I mean? Second impression. Look, I'll be honest with you folks. This second impression began as a bit of an afterthought, you know? I really just wanted to demonstrate that I could do more impression-wise than just Stone Cold Steve Austin. But I'm not a natural impressionist, you know? I don't have just impressions floating around. I gotta think of a goddamn impression, you know? And I'm sitting around for a couple weeks, I can't think of one, and then it hit me. I was on my couch watching the 1996 remake of Romeo and Juliet. starring Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. And it hit me. I was like, here's your premise for a second impression, Scott. What if in 1996, when they were making this film, what if instead of Leonardo DiCaprio in the role of Romeo, they had cast one Arnold Schwarzenegger? All right. And then Arnold, he couldn't do the film. He was actually overseas at the time, and they replaced him at the last minute with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Well, I think that'd go a little something like this. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet is the sun. That's going to do it for me, guys. My name is Scott Chris. Thank y'all so much. It's been a lot of fun.
One more time for Scott Chris.